Yeah. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you to this audit and risk meetings, this committee meeting this afternoon, and call for any apologies. I have two, Councillor Stringer and Councillor Reid. I think that there's no other members missing. Could I have a move that those apologies be? Councillor Gardine, seconder, please. The Mayor Ben Bell. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Right. Welcome, Miles.
Thank you.
Can you hear us? Fine.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you. Fine. So we'll move on to item 2, which is the quarterly Treasury report. Miles, have you got anything to add to your report?
Well, if you just want to give me a few minutes, because the world has really changed. Well, the interest rate market has changed considerably since I wrote the report. This report was written, and especially the commentary and how it applies to the council, because let's get this on a different screen. Interest rates peaked on the 3rd of October, so just after the report was written, and they actually reached peaks that we haven't seen since just before the global financial crisis. That was the extent of the move up that we've actually had, and it was especially pronounced in the 2 months probably leading up to the end of the quarter. That was due to a number of factors, the US debt ceiling, the inflation problems that you had in June, and then it was more the inflation outlook, but that has moderated quite considerably. And then on the 3rd of October, the US Federal Reserve met. So I'll take the report, the commentary is read, and then start, if it's useful, I can just update you as to where you are now, as to where we are now.
Yeah.
Would that be useful?
Yeah, that would be useful, Miles.
So on the 3rd of October, the Fed met, and they produced what we call a more dovish outlook for the interest rate market. They seem to indicate that there would be headwinds for the US economy, and that it would, with consumer spending, the housing market, and what the markets took that as meaning was that they wouldn't actually be hiking interest rates anymore, and they started pushing the US Treasury bond yield down quite considerably. It reached a peak of 502. It's now at 425. So after that, they had in November they had an inflation print which was slightly lower than expected. So I compared the fact, well, they took it as affirmation or confirmation that inflation was past its peak, and it was actually going down faster now. The only ironic thing about it was they projected, this was for the year ending October, which came out in early November, inflation, and they projected it to be at 3.3, and it came in at 3.2, which is hardly earth-shattering. I mean, it's almost around the year of it. They pushed the US 10-year Treasury bond yield down by 20 basis points. employment data come out for the October month, and added less jobs, quite a few less jobs than they actually expected, 175,000, and that pushed yields down as well. So New Zealand interest rates followed. Oh, they did have lower budgets, slightly lower deficit for the fourth quarter, and that would lead to slightly lower bond issuance because they had an absolute mountain of issuance leading up to that because of funding the deficit and also the hangover from the debt ceiling when they couldn't issue debt. So we've had the US 10-year in 2 months fall by 0.75%, and our yields have fallen not quite to the same extent, but still very noticeably. And our 5-year swap rate, to give you, in this commentary that at the time the report was written, it was 5.22. Now we're at about 4.60. 10-year is at about 4.70. The short-term rates come down a bit. The 90-day rate is at 5.65. The 2-year rate was at 5.72. Now we're at 5.20. That's in the economic commentary in the New Zealand section. So you can see that we've had big moves down. We've had big moves down in interest rates as a result of those moves in the US. Now the other thing that has happened, which is quite noticeable, is that the markets at the end of December were forecasting about a 32% chance at the peak that the OCR would get to 6%. It's at 5.50 at the moment, so they were factoring in 100% probability that it would be at 5.75, and they were factoring in a 30% chance or 32% chance that it would be at 6%. This is by April next year. Now they're factoring in a 4% chance that it will be at 5.75 by February, and no chance that it will be, it's a little bit ironic, that by April it will actually be at 5.75. So the markets are very much of the view that we're finished with the tightening cycle. They did have a terminal rate for the OCR of around about 5.40. Now they're at 4.70. So they see it coming back quite a bit faster than what was projected at the end of September. In New Zealand, we had the monetary policy statement last week. The Reserve Bank, it was typical of Adrian, although he just wanted to shock the markets a little bit, and so he actually projected that the cash rate would go up by about 10 points. Why he projected that, I don't know. I think he was just trying to he was trying to live up to his name of shock and awe. But maybe he thought the markets were getting a wee bit ahead of themselves. So that's the broader economic update, where we are now compared to where we were at the end of September. Are there any questions on that? The economy?
No, there's no questions. Moving on to the report. On the liquidity and funding graph, it shows that you've got a very good spread of maturities. This is, I don't know what it is on your one, but it's the what number? It's our slide 4, but it's liquidity and funding slide. So showing a good spread of maturities. Yeah.
Policy compliance, you are compliant with policy, the interest rate policy control bands, but also the liquidity ratio. The liquidity ratio is the one that's imposed by the local government funding agency, which requires you to have basically, well, they say 110%, I prefer to say 10% above your projected peak borrowing requirements. That's just to ensure that you can fund yourself in the event of some unforeseen circumstance occurring. So you've got a 5% headroom there. We've just got to keep a wee bit of an eye on that. It's not a whole lot above it, so I'll be in touch with Law and Aegis before the end of the quarter just to make sure that we are okay with that. Is she due back before the end of December?
Early January.
Okay.
With a possibility of early January, but with the possibility of some very short tenured work this side of Christmas.
Okay.
But that's not a guarantee, but it could be.
Right. Cost of funds, September 4.83. Now, I know this has gone up, and you'll see, I'll move on to that in a minute. just explaining that from an interest rate risk management perspective, what my strategy here for you would be, now this gets a wee bit technical, but at the moment we've got an inverted yield curve, which means that longer term rates are lower than shorter term rates. That's unusual, and the last time we had it was just prior to the global financial crisis. It's normally an indicator, a precursor to a recession, or we did have a recession briefly until the Reserve Bank Statistics New Zealand revised the numbers earlier this year, and we didn't actually have a recession. So it was a recession that wasn't. But it's normally a precursor to interest rates falling. So what the markets are doing are pushing longer term rates down in the expectation that interest rates will fall. What it does is it produces swap rates, interest rate swap rates, which we use to manage council's debt. Ones that start in the future are actually lower than ones that start now. For example, we can do some forward start swaps starting in, say, 2 or 3 years' time, about 4.4%, whereas the equivalent swap rate is about 4.7. So what we will look to do is when rates fall, and my trigger level for these is below 4%, that we would start looking at them. So if we can get some what we call forward start swaps below 4%, we would look to initiate them, and then as the cash rate does come down, presumably it'll come down, we start doing some swaps to fill up the earlier part of the hedging profile, which is probably the 0 to 2 year one. And it does really come back to what is the neutral rate for the OCR. I mean, I think it's somewhere between 325 and 375. Michael and I just had a bit of a discussion on it. I think it's right fair to say, isn't it, Michael, that we were in broad agreement that the cash rate, the neutral cash rate is around there.
You were a little bit more optimistic than me.
You were thinking we were higher?
Yeah, I was thinking a little bit higher.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, no one knows. But if the swap rate gets to below 4, then that gives us an opportunity to lock in a rate that's going to lower the council's cost of funding and therefore lower the impact on rates. And that, at the end of the day, is the more important.
And that's the target that I'm looking for, as I said, to fall below 4% before we initiate the hedging. So it will give you higher levels of fixed rate cover at rates that are lower than where we are at the moment. It'll lower your cost of funds, and it'll give you more certainty of interest rates, more certainty of interest costs going forward. Now, on that same page, it does have your interest rate projection. Now, that one has actually fallen a little bit because of the fall in interest rates. That projection has fallen, and at the moment, I've just updated it just before, and it had you falling down to about your rate falling down to about 4.24% by June 2025. At the moment, it's 4.87. Now, I think that actually might get lower. I think that projection will get lower as interest rates continue to fall, and I think you'll get closer to 4%. So, and as I say, that will happen when the Reserve Bank's easing cycle comes in. The cost of funds history, I mean, that doesn't look that pretty at the moment for you, but I mean, it is the same as a lot of other councils, and there's some good news there, is that you've got a 4 in front of it, not a 5. We inherited a council that previously had, they weren't using us and their cost of funds. They had a AA credit rating of 6%. So you're at 4.83%. So it's certainly, it's not the lowest, but it's certainly not the highest. One of the problems that we're having, two problems here. I mean, one of them is that we didn't project interest rates that go this high this quickly. But I think I might have said to you before, no one did. Not the New Zealand Reserve Bank. They told borrowers that interest rates are going to go negative and not to fix any debt. US Federal Reserve didn't pick it. The banks didn't pick it. The bank's economists didn't pick it. The market didn't pick it. We didn't pick it. And this was just I think I'm sure I've said it before, this is just the occurrence that happened because of COVID and the inflationary effects of it. So that's the report. If I haven't taken too long, are there any questions on that?
Michael has a question.
Yeah, Miles, you sent me the latest LGFA borrowing rates earlier today, and when I look at it, right, it tells me that the expected average return or interest rate over the next 5 months is 5.843. Then the expected interest rate in the 6th month, which is May next year, is 6.22. And then the expected interest rates from June to October next year, or to November next year, is 5.75.
I'll just grab that. I've just got the latest one on the printer. I'll just grab it. Excuse me.
Pardon? Yeah, this is the one that's come today. Yeah. Right.
I've
So,
got that in front of me
yeah,
now, Michael.
yeah. So for the next 5 months, it's 5.843. Right, and then in the month of May next year, it's 6.22, and then in the months from June to November, it's 5.75. Now, if you just solve the implied interest rates based on those borrowing yields, and that tells me
Which column are you looking at? Sorry.
at the short-term loans,
Yeah.
borrowing yield unrated councils.
Oh yeah.
Okay,
So 3 months.
so 5 months, 5.843.
Yeah.
1 year, it's 5.83. So you can actually solve backwards, and so it means in May next year it's 6.22, and then in June to November next year it's 5.75, and that just tells me it's a nonsense, right? Because you can't have 5.8 jumped up for 1 month to 6.22 and then immediately falls back down to below 5.8. So there's something going wrong with the LGFA's book for them to be offering rates like that. And so is it an error?
You look at their 3-month CP rate, 5.82.
No. So if you look at their 6-month borrowing yield unrated councils, 5.96. Right, so if I pay 5.843 for 5 months, and I pay 5.906 for 6 months, that implies that in the 6th month I must be paying 6.22. I know this is starting to get technical, but it's just a nonsense that the rates would jump up that much in 1 month. So there's something either wrong with the rates or there's something wrong with the book of LGFA.
So the 5-month rate is 5.843.
Yep.
The 6-month is 5.906.
And then the 1 year is 5.830.
It's 5.83. So it's
Yeah.
down 7 points.
Yeah, so you can solve backwards to work out what is the rate for the first 5 months, what is the rate for the 6th month, and what is the rate for months 7 to 12. What is the implied rate?
Yeah, okay.
So-
I'll have to look at that, but I'm just thinking it's a function of the inverted yield curve where rates start going down.
But that just tells me that there's going to be there's expected to be opportunities in the next 6 months for us to lower our cost of borrowing.
Yeah. Yes, there will be. But and then if you actually look at the forward start swap grid, I think I might have said that to you before. That's actually giving you the opportunity to have lower interest rates over the next 6 months because we've got this inverted yield curve at the moment.
Yep. So to me, the question is what processes do we need to put in place to make sure that we capture those opportunities should they occur? Because the market is saying they should occur.
Okay, so we're monitoring the rates on a daily, weekly basis. My trigger is if some of these forward start swap rates get below this 4% level. Now, I'll have what I'm doing is I've actually already got the bank, ANZ Bank, I've said that who you transact the swaps with, that if these interest rates do get below 4%, but I'd like to know, I'll inform council straight away, we'll be modelling which ones are the most opportune ones to transact, and then I will get in touch with council. I mean, it won't happen before Christmas unless we have some sort of absolute calamity happen. But the onus is on me to say to council, okay, we have met our target, we've got sub 4%, we can model these rates, show what it'll do to your projected cost of funds, and then it's up to council to, well, the law name, I presume, to be, because she has the authority under the Treasury policy, and I'm certainly happy to share it with the Audit and Risk Committee if you want me to run it past that as well, or if it's their responsibility. So I think you can rest assured that I have got that order in with the bank, or what we call it, the call order, so they will ring us if rates get, and I'll be looking at them anyway, if they do get below 4%, so we can initiate hedging.
Well, I guess my question is for the council's management in terms of, with Lorne away, how do we make sure that we can respond on a timely basis?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I guess that we're reliant on Miles, I guess, and his team of experts to actually guide us in this area. I mean, this term of council hasn't put in place the Treasury Management Subcommittee, which I think would behove it to do so that, and for those who are new, the last term of council had a Treasury Management Subcommittee comprised of obviously Michael, Miles and a couple of elected members and senior management to just be able to review the interest rate environment at any given time and make decisions to respond to difference in conditions or advantageous circumstances as they arose, and reported back decisions they made to the Audit and Risk Committee. And it may well, and that this is beyond the Audit and Risk Committee to set up a subcommittee, but it can recommend to the full council that a Treasury Management Subcommittee be instituted for the balance of the current electoral term.
Yeah, my question was more in terms of, with Lorne array, if it happened tomorrow, do we have the right people in place to make the decision? Because we haven't delegated decision to Miles.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the answer is yes, because I have delegated authority to move as we need to in regard to recommendations that may come from Miles, and Lorne obviously is generally the go-to person. She is still available on a limited capacity, but I'd be the first port of call or cab off the rank to deal with any Treasury recommendation emanating from Miles.
So I could send an email to yourself, Steve, and to Lorne, and if you want me to copy in any of the committee members, I can do that as well.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, yeah, it'd be good, Miles. I think it would pay you to copy in the Chair of Audit and Risk, Stuart, and Michael, our independent member.
Yeah. I'll let that discussion run on, because this is extremely important for council. Debt, a 1% movement in our interest rates upwards costs in excess of $500,000 to the council, which in terms is a 2% rate rise if we had to fund another. So it's so important that we get this right, and I've been heartened by the discussion between Michael and Miles today that interest rates are looking like declining, because I was scribbling, if you saw my notes on these pages here, of what extra cost it would be as we borrow more money, and I can understand why we've suddenly gone up. People would say we hadn't planned well, but we've borrowed nearly 20 million in the last wee while to fund all our projects, and that's all had to be at the high rates because we haven't had it in there. So
I think, and further to that, Mr. Chairman, I think it needs to be emphasised that the borrowing the council undertook is in line with the long-term plan.
yeah,
and was underpinning some essential projects that we now see have substantially been completed, whether it's Elizabeth Street, whether it's the library next door, whether it's the new membrane plant for the East School water treatment, or indeed Matara.
Yeah. Yeah, there was no implied criticism in any
No,
of that.
no, just...
That was just fact.
Yep.
Councillor.
I was just going to say, the other question I had relates to with the new government's announcement that Three Waters is dead. Has anybody done any work as to what that might mean for borrowing? Because any new development was going to be somebody else's problem, not ours.
Steve, I'll leave that to you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, look, not a great deal of work. At the moment, we know we've got about roughly $10 million of headroom in our borrowing capacity. That will enable us to do a couple of essential projects that we need to tackle. One of which is the pipeline under the river and a new reservoir for Gore. But beyond that, it's fair to say that a lot of councils in New Zealand are now staring down the barrel of, well, what do we do? And this will probably come to a head in your long-term plan, where we have to forecast our debt. And hitherto, it was always on the basis that in 2025, the debt, or a good portion, the Three Waters debt would leave us for another entity. And if we are to believe what is being pronounced by the new government, that is not going to take place, although the new government, I understand, is more around creation of CCOs and having balance sheet separation that way. If that occurs, that will give us more headroom, but we still have the issue around the loss of the revenues, the loss of that business unit to apportion overheads, and whether this government has the same sympathy as the last in terms of funding redress so that we're no better off, all remains a moot point, and I dare say more clarity will emerge in the coming weeks and months. But a point that has been, I think, struck council very deeply is how can we develop a long-term plan when we know these law changes are in the wind, and whatever we come up with may not actually reflect reality in the coming months. So that's what we're turning our mind to at the moment, and there are political advocacies currently trained to try and see if the long-term plan can be put back a bit, to give council some breathing space to just try and figure out the landscape over the next 12 months, never mind the next 10 years.
Councillor Gardner.
I'm a bit shy on swaps. I'd rather take the risk a bit more and go short and then see the interest rates drop. Once you've locked swaps in, as we saw in the last 5-6 years, we've been paying above, but now we're actually winning on the swaps. But I'd like to see a paper really on those swaps and what the costs are and the margin costs are to the banks that we pay on those swaps to present to this committee, because I think it's very important to understand the full cost of swaps.
If I could answer that one, Mr. Chairman. Swaps at the right time, used properly at the right time, are a very useful risk management tool, because they enable you to lock in these forwards, especially in the environment that we've got at the moment. They enable you to lock in forward start swap rates that are below the current rate. Now, at the moment, I could lock some swaps in for you in the future, starting in 2 or 3 years' time, lasting for 3 years, at 4.4%. Now, that's 1.1% below where the 90-day rate is at the moment, where the floating rate is. So, at certain times, they are very good. Now, what we've done with Gore is that I have a preference for fixed rate bonds. If it produces the same risk management profile, or fixed to floating profile, I have a preference for fixed rate bonds, because they're actually slightly cheaper. It's about 0.07% when compared if you do a floating rate also there's less administrative time as well, because you only get two coupon payments a year, so 2 transactions compared to 8. You do it the other way around with a floating rate instrument and swaps over the top of it. So we've actually done papers to council, the various councils on this topic, because I mean it does get raised quite often. Swaps have a bad connotation, and they did receive bad publicity because of what happened in 2008, especially with the farmers. They were sold badly by the banks, but used properly, they can be very advantageous. And I mean, they have given you the advantage. I'm just looking at your swaps. I mean, you've got some swaps here. You know, look at 3.22 and 2.95 and 2.85 and 3.34. So they did in the past give you the advantage, give you the ability to take out or fix your interest costs of ones that are considerably lower than where we are now. And we've used fixed rate bonds. I mean, we have what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fixed rate bonds as well. So it's a mixture. I mean, I don't like to get fixated on one or the other. What we just want to do is produce the best outcome for Gore, and at certain times swaps are the most appropriate one, and other times fixed rate bonds are.
Yeah. Councillor Garline?
Yeah, I like the use of the fixed rate bonds better than the swaps. I think there's a margin against us. Yeah.
If I can comment, most of the time fixed rate bonds are the better instrument. There are a few times when, because of the quirk of the market, you would actually take out a swap, where you're better to swap the floating rate for fixed rate. But in my experience, that's less than a third of the time. The rest of the time, you're better to either be floating or fixed and get certainty.
The big thing with fixed rate bonds is that you can't do them out of a longer dated fixed rate, out of a forward start term. That's their big disadvantage compared to swaps.
Is there any other comments on the Treasury report in front of us?
Could I just make a comment?
Yeah.
You did talk about Three Waters, Mr. Chairman. I've got a little, I've got 1 or 2 thoughts on it. Do you want me to spare, if you've got 2 or 3 minutes?
We right with that? Okay. Yes.
I actually got rung up the other day by, just after the election, by the person that, one of the senior guys at DIA, who was responsible for putting in place the debt profile for the new Three Waters. He was asking me what councils were doing. I thought that was a wee bit ironic, the DIA putting it in place asking me, and I just said, well, in the absence of any certainty, it's business as usual. Because we don't, I mean, there are 1 or 2 councils actually who took the very firm view that 1 July 34 was going to be the date and that set in concrete, and they did a lot of risk management around, they based their risk management and funding profiles around that, and I didn't agree with it, but it didn't work. What my colleague and I think will happen is that, well, we're not sure what will happen, but what seems to be talked about at the moment is what Steve said is a CCO type model, council controlled organisation or trading organisation. But the big unknown is what sort of guarantee councils will provide for it. Because if you have balance sheet, I'm right in saying something about it, if you have balance sheet separation, you have a CCO, then the councils can't guarantee that CCO. And that's the way that councils and council controlled trading organisations can get a lower interest rate, because they get the benefit of the council guarantee. And therefore councils, because of their statutory ability to charge general and special rates, get a lot higher credit standing than a CCO, which would not have that ability. So this is, to us, this is the key point. Whether or not there will be, am I right on this one, David? Whether or not how this new entity will be funded. Will it be as a standalone enterprise, or will it be as a separate entity but with a council guarantee?
Well, so two scenarios that can happen here. So I think in terms of the Castalia report, they sort of favour the CCO model. Now the CCO model basically means from a council point of view, you may want to decide whether you want to guarantee the CCO. If that's the case, then that will probably have an impact on terms of your credit rating. Or if you want it to operate as a swap, sorry, your employment credit rating, yeah. Or you may just want to have that water entity as a standalone operation, which would basically be set up to fund basically itself. And that would have a completely different debt profile or implied credit rating for that. And because of that, would have higher interest rates.
Standalone entity without any council support or guarantee, it's going to cost considerably more to borrow than if it did have, the present arrangement where water is funded through council, therefore the LGFA, or if it is on a standalone basis without that council guarantee by the way of unpooled capital, then the borrowing cost will be quite a bit lower. But we don't know what is going to happen. I mean, this is what everyone's waiting for now.
Mayor Ben, Bell? Yeah.
There we go. Just on that, those two different routes, a number of questions. First, with the CCO guaranteed by councils, will that have to be a council decision by each of the councils involved in that CCO? So will they all have to agree to back that CCO?
So I didn't quite get that. So we were unclear.
I've got to say, at this point, we're trying to guess what government policy is, which is, obviously fraught with risk.
Yeah.
But our best guess is yes, council will have a choice as to whether it wants to guarantee or whether it wants to leave it as a standalone entity. That's how you just qualify, that's our best guess.
Council government, one of the nationalists said that the new, whereas under Labor, the new water entities it was going to be compulsory, and first it was going to be 4, then they were going to be 10. Now they're saying that it will be voluntary, and you don't have to join one of these water entities. You don't have to put your water services into one of these new entities. But we've just come from a meeting with another council, and they said, well, how long is that going to last? Because I mean, you're going to have the weaker ones, who the stronger ones won't want to join. So this particular council thought that it would actually become compulsory. It would be too much division otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, our big players are Dunedin and Invercargill, and Invercargill's already indicated which way they're going to go, and I think Dunedin, if they had a choice, would be the same. So I think that'd be disastrous for a small rural council like us, but that's just my political view. Just with that standalone, so even if they would be able to charge their own rates, it would still be considered a standalone, like the interest rates would still be through the roof?
If they were a standalone entity with council support.
Well, with the ability to charge their own rates, so if it was written into legislation that they can charge their own water rate, for example, would they have that borrowing capacity? Would they have that same borrowing capacity as us, or would they be? No.
I don't think that a water charge would carry the same credit strength from a credit perspective as a charge over rates, because the charge over rates has as one of its basic features the ability of a council to sell a property, and that ability in the event of a ratepayer. Yeah. Now it's easy to sell a house, but you can't sell some pipes, or if someone isn't paying water, isn't paying their water rates. And remember, that ability to sell a property actually takes precedence over a bank's mortgage. So we don't think that a charge over, even a statutory charge over water rates, and the ability to charge water rates carrying the same credit strength as the current ones.
Thank you for that. That's hugely insightful. That's a I mean, you couldn't have simplified it any more if you can't sell pipes in the ground, but you can sell assets above ground. Yeah.
Thank you, Miles. We better leave it there, because we've got to move on. We've got some other meetings today. So thanks, Miles. Could someone move that the recommendation that the report be received? Michael, well, do I have a seconder? Councillor Gardine. All those in favour say aye. Aye. And against? Carried. Do you want to word something about a treasury management, or do we do that at a later date?
You can form a recommendation to full council if you wish.
Sorry, can I interrupt? I think I asked about it at the previous council in the minutes, and if I remember correctly, Lorna said it was going to be part of the 19th December council meeting, if I remember correctly.
Well, okay. If you just take
I'm pretty sure I did ask about it, and it was planned to be formed.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, we'll move on to the aged debtors report. The management accountant isn't with us, so has anyone got any comments, or do you want to speak to this report at all, Steve?
I will endeavour to, Mr Chair. Look, it's fairly straightforward. I mean, you're always looking for high percentages for your, in terms of what's been paid in the current portion. So we have very low percentages in the 30 days and greater. So it's actually better than what historically I've viewed in the past. So I'm very comfortable.
Yeah, it doesn't look to be, reading through the report, to me it doesn't look to be any problems with the payment of debtors. Does anyone else? Oh, Councillor Gardine first.
Just on the clean air loans, I noticed the applications have been put on hold, so basically that's been held and the existing loans will just run their time because of the changes to the Credit Rating Act.
Yes. Yep. That's correct. Michael?
The 5K that's more than 90 days, under notable debtors, is that likely to be embarrassing for the council?
That's that. Rent on land.
I don't think so, Mr Chair, but I don't know the actual property concern, so I can't give you a categoric answer, but it's being followed up. So as Chief Executive, these things generally start to arrive at your desk when things are starting to look entrenched or difficult to move, and I haven't had that in my orbit to date.
Anyone else got any comments or concerns or questions about the report? It seems pretty good to me that we seem to be on track with, as the Chief Executive said, so there's nothing outstanding there. Would someone like to move that the report be received? Councillor Paul McPhail, seconder please. Michael Chamberlain. All those in favour say aye. And against? Carried. Next report is the Three Waters Level of Service report. Aaron, do you want to comment on this?
Through you, Mr Chair. Can take this report as written, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Aaron? Oh, sorry, Mayor Ben.
Not so much as a question, and I know I've said it in this forum before, but just a very well done to Aaron and your team, and Jason and your team, for the emergency response. It's pretty impressive to have two complaints when the streets were filled with water, so I know that you guys worked tirelessly to make sure that was pretty low, so thank you very much for your guys' effort.
Councillor McPhail, Paul McPhail.
Thank you, through the chair. Look, I was just going to make a comment. I say I think it's a very good report. I'd just like to make a comment. I actually got called up on the flood day, and I was out at the customer's house within 5 minutes. So, as a council, we were actually reacting quicker. So, I think well done.
Is there any other comments or questions on the report? Could I have a mover that the report be... You're moving. Move Councillor Rich McPhail, seconded Councillor Gardine. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Health and safety report is the next item on the agenda. Nikki, have you got anything you want to add to this report?
Not really. Look, it's a pretty basic report this month, so just happy to take any questions if anything anybody has any concerns over. Michael.
Sorry, Michael.
I don't have a concern, but I have a question as to what would the evacuation times be if we didn't tell everybody in advance when the evacuation was going to take place?
In what instance do you mean?
What was that? So we say when the next evacuation date's going to be for the trial evacuations.
Perhaps I can assist. As a participant in the evacuation, I can assure you we didn't know it was going to happen,
No.
and we didn't know we were being tested either. So I think the system works well. This was a surprise to me in terms of the dates being planned, but unless staff put that on their desk in a sticky tape somewhere, I guarantee you they'll probably forget and they'll get an equal shock like me when the siren goes off and you're told to get out.
So I think in terms of it, it's just that we record how long it did take on that table so that we have a recollection of what it was last time. It's probably just need to move the table around, Michael, so it's a bit clearer.
And just one comment here on page, it's 19, you've got MLT. Someone reading this in the future might think we're part of the Mataura Licensing Trust. Perhaps we better make that the multi-sports centre.
No problem.
It can be confusing. I have struck that with things in the past where someone's written something like that and it's got quite confusing reading it years later. Is there any other... Mayor Bean-Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question on the evacuations. The East and Southern Gallery, just wondering why that's a new scheme. It wasn't my understanding that we owned that building as to why we'd be doing evacuations out of there.
We've assisted with those departments because we have staff in them. So our staff are sitting in those departments, so therefore we, at that point, we help Mandeville with theirs as well to do theirs.
And just a typo there, I'm assuming it's meant to be 2024, not 2023 on that bottom square.
Correct. Yep.
Are there any other questions or comments on this report? Could I have a move that the report be received? Michael Chamberlain, have a seconder, please. Mayor Ben-Bell. All those in favour say aye. 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 Against? Carried. Right. Next item on the agenda is the risk pool. Call on members' additional contributions. So I ask the interim chief executive just to bring us up to date on this, please.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Look, as I said in my report, it wasn't the news we wanted before Christmas. We have been getting signals from Wellington that there may well be a call on funds of members. This is a scheme where I'm reminded of those who've been married, wedding vows, where it's for better or worse. And this is in the worst category in terms of if your contributions don't cover the claims, and together with the reinsurance arrangements that can sometimes make this less painful than it is, then you're left with a residual liability that members have to pick up. The scheme is being wound down. The council has been a member since its inception of around 30 odd years ago. And you can always be clever in hindsight, but I guess in reality this council has been a pretty low risk member. Particularly when it comes to leaky buildings, our construction methods are more conservative and conventional, and most of the risk with the leaky buildings was to do with the 2004 Building Act, but of course there's a 10-year period in which owners can discover they've got a problem and then litigate and then get an outcome, and councils, as you know, are often the last person or entity standing and therefore a fair target. So we'll have to obviously pay this, and that clears up a few years in the past, but there may be some other fund years where there is an imbalance, and there may well be, just as hinted in the letter, a future call on members. So when the council does its budgets for next year, it may be prudent and this is something for the council to actually consider, is putting a provision aside for future liabilities that may need the council to meet.
Michael Chamberlain?
Do we know if there's any other court cases currently active or planned that will have an impact on this? Because there'll have to be a court case for us to have a liability.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure about court cases, but I think there are claims in the system that are still being worked through and resolved. That in turn may generate a court case. So, but if the committee wishes to, I could find out a bit more from the scheme manager about where the various years that have yet to be closed out are and what exposure levels there are to potential claims or court cases.
I'd recommend that we do that because it's crucial to the provision we put into the 10-year plan.
Yeah, we need that base information. Otherwise, we'd be just chucking a number at the dartboard, basically, to what the size of the provision would need it to be. Is there any other comments or questions on this report? Have you got a question?
Just a question for through the CEO, through the chair there. I think I asked this before when we've done risk pool. Have we ever actually made a claim? We've never made a claim, have we? No. We never accessed the fund, did we? No.
If there are no more questions or comments on, Mayor Ben Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on that then, what is the timeframe for it being wrapped up, and do we still feel the need to be a part of this, or is there an option to opt out, or?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, we've opted out and the scheme is being wound down, but you are still accountable for the past years. So we're just working our way through, closing out year by year, and to find out, we just need to find out what is in the system that is still alive and potentially could exceed the scheme's ability to actually meet those expenses.
You note on the last page, it's back in, we're dealing with years 203 through to 209, so there's could be still a few years to come.
That's why, Mr. Chairman, because those years were high risk. The leaky building syndrome was alive and kicking pre-2005, and then of course in 2004 the Building Act changed, and the kind of construction methods and use of untreated timber and monolithic cladding was put to one side, and therefore most of these claims actually emanate from either pre-2004 or the problems started there and were discovered in 2009, 2010, even 2011, and therefore triggered a claim which has to be either worked through or it could potentially be a court case a la the Napier waterfront apartments.
So what year did we opt out then? What would this go up to?
through you, Mr. Chairman, I think around about 2018 off the top of my head.
Another 10 years worth of backlog that we may have to
Through you, yes, I think most of the claims under the long stop, there's what they call a long stop rule with, and most of this is to do with leaky buildings. And under the long stop rule, basically it's 10 years after the building was erected, your claim's got to be lodged. So most of the risk arises around pre-2005. You add 10 years to that, by the time you get to 2015 and 16, you should be out of the woods.
Okay, we've got a recommendation here. Can I have a mover that the requirement the council pay the additional contribution of $60,656 plus GST by the 20th of September be noted? Can I have a mover for that? Councillor Garnine, seconded Mr. Michael Chamberlain. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Right, we're on to item 6, protozoa, barriers in drinking water supplies. We've got a report from the Three Waters Asset Manager. Do you want to speak to this report? Yeah.
Through Mr. Chairman, we'll take the report as read. Yeah, I guess the only thing I'd add to it is that the discussions with the directional drilling contractor are progressing reasonably well. We are talking to them about some different pipe sizes and some different options around pipe sizing to reduce the level of risk of the drilling. Potentially, the drilling contractor is saying that if we went for four smaller diameter pipes rather than the 2 bigger pipes, it could significantly reduce the risk and potentially be a similar cost. Sounds like they're happy to do a design and risk assessment and costing for some different pipe size options, so that then the council will be able to consider the cost and risk of those options and make a decision at a later date. So, yeah, happy to take any questions.
Because the only way we really can deal with this problem, other than putting in some treatment up at Hillborough Avenue, is get the water across the river. That's the short answer, isn't it? And we've got to have it done by December 2025.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. Councillor Mackenzie.
Matt, with this, if we went with the smaller holes, pipes, etc., are they still withdrawable and fixable?
Through Mr. Chairman, and so that's another consideration that we're talking to the driller about. So there's obviously an option to have a carrier pipe with a smaller pipe inside it that would give you that flexibility, but that then requires a larger hole to be drilled.
Yeah.
My understanding is that the majority of drilling projects that they've done, the clients opted not to install a carrier pipe, and I guess if there was an issue with, if you did opt out of the carrier pipe and just installed a straight pipe, and there was an issue, there's potential options to line the inside of the pipe.
Okay.
So there's that, and that's one of the benefits of looking at the 4 pipelines versus 2, is that if you did have an issue with one, you've got some flexibility. You've still got another pipe there that you can get some water through. So.
Thanks for that, Matt. I think in the past I probably did ask this question of the 2 bigger pipes, and I think it was discussed that yes, the pipes can be still fixed, for want of a better term.
Yeah, that's correct, and I guess the other consideration around that is, what is the possibility of having an issue with a pipe once it's been installed, and with the construction materials, that they now use, that possibility is probably pretty low. And the other thing is generally the procedure is to what they call derate the pipe. And that basically means you figure out what the design pressure of the pipe is and then go up another pipe class just to give you that extra factor of safety. So there's a lot of options there around managing risk.
Thank you for that, Matt.
Michael Chamberlain.
Is the 3.6 to 4.1 million estimated cost something that we have known about and is built into the current 10-year plan, or is this new debt that we're going to suddenly have to take on?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, this is planned in the long-term plan. We're either going to build a bridge or a pipeline to the river, so that's factored into our debt forecast currently.
Councillor Gardon, do you have a question?
Just a question through the chair for Matt. I presume we were aiming for a 9-inch or a 225 pipe. What are we aiming for? And for 2 pipes, is it 150 or 180?
Through the chair, so you lost me with your imperial measurements, but the original pipeline that was going to go across the bridge was DN 315, 315 millimetres. With the shorter distance and more direct alignment of the drilling, we can reduce that to a 280 millimetre pipe and still get the same capacity. If we go for the same capacity with the 4 pipe options, we'd be looking at a 225 millimetre pipe. I guess on that, the original design allowed for a lot of future proofing. So currently we need to get about 34 litres a second backwards and forwards across the river, but the capacity of that original pipe allowed for 67 litres a second. So there is further options around reducing that capacity if that was if the council thought that was a good idea. It is a tricky one with the future proofing, because often you can spend a lot more money or take on more risk, allowing for something that never actually gets used. But then on the same side, you obviously want to do it once and make sure that you have got enough future capacity. So it certainly needs a bit more thought before we confirm it.
Any other questions? Okay, we've got a recommendation that the report be received, that the council notes that Town Aura has the expectation of achieving compliance with the requirements for protozoa barriers in drinking water supplies. So, someone move? Okay.
If we fail in our river crossing, we are really in trouble here, and this is a risk we have, because they're going to come down. We will fail in our timescale quite badly. So what is our plan if we fail, or is there?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, yeah, I mean there is that risk there, and I think we certainly there are obviously alternative options and things. I think realistically we've got a bit of time off our sleeve before we need to progress looking at those options yet. And I guess if we got to say the middle of next year and we're concerned, then we might start needing to look at those. But I think the other thing around managing the situation and the risk is making sure that we have clear and regular communication with Te Mata Arawa. I think as long as they can see that we are working as quickly as possible towards a solution, and you know, if we do encounter issues, if we communicate around those and make Te Mata Arawai aware of them, then hopefully they'll be understanding of that. The other thing I think to note here is that we are reasonably progressed around our plans to achieve protozoa compliance. You might have seen in the media over the last few weeks there's been a few councils that aren't as progressed as us and are really quite concerned around meeting that time frame. And so I guess I wouldn't think that Te Mata Arawai will be handing out enforcement notices to every council that can't meet that time frame if they are working towards it as quickly as possible.
It's just the question was, I was proposing if the river fails, we've really got to put and we can't get a bridge up in time, their deadline is the end of 25, you'd have to look seriously at UV treatment on this side of the river.
Yeah, that would certainly be an option, yeah. And I mean, you could look at, I guess, doing a minor upgrade at Hilbury to get you through until you could get your pipeline across, or you can look at other options around getting the pipeline across the river as well.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just I think Matt summed it up very well. Either way, it's Hobson's choice because we've had this long process of trying to get a pipe either under or over the river. If we do encounter problems, and the risks were presented to the council when it made its decision mid-year that, okay, there's no things guaranteed, both in terms of pricing and obviously success, but that's the course of action we're pursuing. If we go to a bridge, you've got most likely consenting issues, delays again. There is a provision called an enforced undertaking in the legislation where you can undertake to do the work required, and in return Te Mata Arawai will not prosecute you under the Act, which does have, as I said to Matt in an email the other day, eye-watering amounts of fines. And I would think it would be incredibly harsh if you had, for example, geological barriers that prevented the under-river drilling, that someone would then seize upon you and prosecute. As Matt quite rightly pointed out, we're well advanced. I'm very proud of what we've done to date with our compliance with protozoa infiltration. We've got roughly a third of the town that has not got that protection, and we're trying to use all measures available to get that pipeline connected and ensure the whole of the Gore Township is completely protected. And when you look at what infrastructure we have put in place, we're well up the queue, I would have thought, compared to some others about where they're at with full drinking water standard compliance and ensuring that protozoa can't get a foothold in your supply. So I think I'm reasonably comfortable, as I said, at the Assets and Infrastructure Committee meeting, but let's see how it plays out, and maybe, mid-year it would behove us to do a review and make sure that we're still satisfied with the strategy and that we do believe the outcome will be in accordance with our expectations.
Are there any more questions of that? So do we have a mover and seconder? So can I have a mover for the report? Councillor Gardine, have a seconder, please. Councillor Richard McPhail. All those in favour say aye. 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 Against? Carried. Right, that brings us to the end of the public side of the meeting for the Audit and Risk Committee.